South Africa's largest teachers' union, SADTU, is calling on government to close all schools until the COVID-19 pandemic peaks. This follows a special meeting of the union's National Executive Committee, which assessed the surge in reported cases at schools. Grades have slowly been phased in over the past few months, despite rocketing infections in the country.
When the Minister of Basic Education announced that schools should be opened under Alert 4, our organization, SADTU, together with the other teacher unions, called on the Minister to ensure the safety of teachers, lecturers, education support personnel, learners and students, because we could not afford to lose lives. Above all, we raised concern about the readiness of the provincial departments with regards to the availability of health and safety essentials that had to be put in place before the opening of the institutions. We then urged the departments to comply with the 14 non-negotiables that were required by the law before our learning institutions could resume any activities. These non-negotiables would have ensured that the learning and teaching environment is compliant and optimal for schools-based activities to unfold in safe conditions. All evidence on the ground is that there is no effective teaching and learning that is taking place under the current conditions. The pandemic has led to pandemonium in the education sector, and this can be linked to the lackluster leadership that we have been experiencing from Department of Basic Education at various levels.
All right, really, let's stay with this issue. We're joined by Stellenbosch University Professor of Education, Jonathan Jansen. Good evening, Professor Jansen, and thanks for your time tonight on News at Prime. You seem to be in agreement that the academic year simply cannot be saved, especially for those who are in the schooling system.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. That is correct. SADTU is spot on. It is impossible, in fact, to rescue the academic year. And it's not because of what the department is doing or not doing. It is quite simply because of what the virus is doing. The virus has effectively shut down and reopened schools, shut them down and reopened. Any number of teachers are, as you know, ill, and some have died, sadly, principals. And parents are scared. Parents are scared that they're sending their children into a death trap, because, remember, schools are congested places in South Africa. They're not places with wide open spaces with big gyms, and they're also not places in which you can guarantee that all the materials that are required, including running water, are guaranteed to be in place. So for that reason, it's not government that's going to close down the schools. The virus will, and SADTU is absolutely correct. It's not just children going to school, it's adults going to school. They're getting sick and then they go home. So I fully support the union, the majority union in this case.
Of course, a decision like that has many consequences, one of them being what happens to the current curriculum. You've, of course, spoken about the complexity of having to come up with a hybrid curriculum for 2021. Do you think that it's something that we can pull off?
Yes, we can, and we did in the past. You know, I lost a year of academic work as a student in the 1970s because of the uprising. And things turned out okay for many of us, you know. So this is not the end of the world. It is perfectly possible to develop a hybrid curriculum for 2021. But what we must not do is make a choice between the lives of their children and teachers on the one hand and the completion of the GAPS curriculum on the other. It is not a choice we should be forced to make.
On the other hand, of course, you're also talking about the danger of trying to wait it out, which I think is what the Department of Basic Education has been doing. You know, they're taking an approach that says, let's keep the ball moving until we know it can't move, then we'll almost reassess the situation, and then we'll get back at it again. But certainly, I don't think they want to be seen as throwing in the towel.
Yeah, look, I understand the political embarrassment for government, and particularly for the Department of Basic Education, because they've been telling us, as critics, that we're going to finish the year no matter what. I understand that's politically embarrassing, but it's not about you. It's not about politics. It really is about the lives of our teachers in particular, but also other workers at the schools, and of course about the children. And so I don't know of any country that reopens its schools when you're still climbing the peak of the pandemic. We're not flatlining yet, and to open schools in particularly in our vulnerable communities, under-resourced as they are, understaffed as they are, and think you can finish the academic year when every day any number of teachers are either quarantined because some other teacher close to them got ill, or are themselves ill and having to stay at home. Then, of course, parents themselves, as you know, are not even in working class communities. You find attendance of children somewhere between 20% and 80%. So those kids are not getting online learning because the schools are too poor. So what I'm saying is the academic year is being lost for us, regardless of what we do.
Professor Jansen, I want us to take a listen to the Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, as he was defending the decision to reopen schools and why he believes it's a good strategy for our country. I'd like to get your response after this quick clip of the Minister.
Sure.
Whilst we understand what the WHO has said, our approach to the schools is based also on some of the precautionary measures that need to be taken as you go into the schools. It is because we know that we are going to be coexisting with the virus for the rest of the year and up to next year. So we need to begin to adjust to that kind of life with the virus. The precautions that we have got to do with the issues of getting the community to change behavior and ensure that the use of masks for everybody who's outdoors, who gets into any other building, for ensuring that they had sanitizers, hand washing and distancing, all of those are put into place. So it's a balancing act that we have to work on, but we're very cautious that if we think that there's any risk, we have to mitigate such a risk.
Professor Jansen, does the Minister's rationale make sense to you that we're going to be with this virus for a long time? The sooner we start learning to live with it, the better, and that includes schools.
No, look, eventually we're going to have to reopen the schools.
All right, unfortunately, it looks like we've lost that line there to Professor Jonathan Jansen. He's out at, of course, Stellenbosch University, giving us his take for tonight. All right, I believe we've got Professor Jansen back on the line. Professor Jansen, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Look, eventually we're going to have to reopen the schools. My point is you don't reopen the schools while you're climbing the peak. It is dangerous. Secondly, what Minister Mkhize doesn't perhaps realize is that in the majority of our schools, you don't have the mitigating factors in place. I'm not talking about the schools where the minister visits and they suddenly have wonderfully, spaced classrooms. That's not the reality when all our kids get back, especially grades, 5 and 8 at the end of August, by which time, by the way, the school year would be over anyway. So you need two things. Experts around the world, educational experts tell you need two things. You need space and you need resources. We don't have either of those things in the majority of our schools, and therefore it is a dangerous decision.
But of course, the suggestion you're making is not that all should be lost. You're saying that there are alternative interventions that can be taken on by government to ensure that there is still some form of learning taking place. And you've brought up the issue of broadcast media, community radio platforms that could be better utilized during this time.
And, it's actually not very difficult to get, both your SABCs and your digital media to run a very tight CAPS curriculum announced in advance with material support to every child, and to run that consistently between now and December. There is nothing that prevents that, except the political will and the educational expertise to make it happen. And so this is something that's completely solvable. I'm not saying the children must sit at home and do nothing. I'm saying we've got to use radio, television, and print for the majority of our schools and organize it in such a way that every child experiences some degree of learning between now and the end of the year.
All right, Professor Jonathan Jansen, let's leave it there for tonight. Thanks for your time on News at Prime.